Let's talk, and let me give you some tips about what it is you may think about when you're looking to hire a vendor to help you manage the e-discovery issues that you've got. You know, the need for a vendor is demonstrated by the market, the tremendous growth in the number of different e-discovery vendors that are out there. In some recent searching that we've done, we've discovered 1,000 e-discovery vendors that can be identified in a Google search when you just use the language e-discovery vendors. So you've got a lot of companies that are growing, and there's estimates by Forrester Research that in fact what we're seeing is an industry that's close to $4 billion industry. So the need to be able to then search through these different vendors and to determine what one is going to be reliable and what one is going to do a good job for you is very, very important. You can obviously go to some of the major players. LexisNexis has bought Applied Discovery, and they can provide you with some good advice. Be careful that what you're recognizing that you're doing is you're really buying the people, and Applied Discovery is big enough so that you really want to do an interview even of that e-discovery person that's going to be assigned to you by the Applied Discovery. And similarly with these other vendors, EMC, which is a leading storage technology company, has bought recently a new e-discovery service. You should recognize that Computer Associates, which is another big house, has recently bought a place called iLumen, which is another e-discovery firm. And so these are examples of big shops with big services that have had a track record. And again, my recommendation is that still, in the face of that, that you interview the individual who is going to be doing it and making sure that you have a good understanding of their competence and their experience. So let's talk together about what it is that you're looking for when you're interviewing the e-discovery vendors. And let me suggest to you, here are a series of questions that you ought to have and what it is that you're going to use to try to judge whether the vendor is going to be acceptable to you. And obviously the first one is that you want to find out how long they've been in this business of doing it, and what their track record is, and obviously it'd be nice to have at least 2 years that would be the experience they've had in doing this kind of work. How many e-discovery jobs have you had? It'd be great to get more than 25 so that in fact you've got this kind of threshold competence that they've seen most of the issues that are going to be coming up if they've had more than 25 of these e-discovery jobs. Have you ever been sanctioned is something to look for. Have they ever had any sanctions against them for messing up or being involved in some level of destruction or spoliation? Obviously that's going to be important to you. Where's the work to be done? This is something that's important to realize, that in fact a fair amount of the vendor's work may be shipped overseas and maybe to India, which is a very likely place where a lot of the e-discovery work, individual work, is going to be done. And the cost can be significantly less if it's done overseas. It could be a third less than if it's done here in the U.S. And so you want to ask where the work is done, and if there's really price sensitivity from the client, that's something that the client would need to be aware of. The client references are important, who it is that they've used before and whether you can get references from them. The price for the preservation work, remember that work of just capturing and stopping everything and preserving it. Usually you'll get an hourly rate plus a cap, and you want to make sure that you have some notion as to what the cap is likely to be. Price for the production work, remember this is the producing of the discovery that presumably the vendor can help you with in terms of the privilege and the cost shifting issues that are going to be involved. And so you want to find out, is it done by the volume of what it is that's going to be produced, or is there an hourly rate that also informs what the costs are going to be? Lawyer inquiry should require a resume from the vendor. And of course, what you want to do is to find out whether or not the vendor is going to be accessible in the non-business hour times, the hours that lawyers work, in order to be able to get your questions answered. And so you want to find out whether or not they are available in the non-business hour settings. You want to have a confidentiality agreement to make sure that there's nothing that's going to be out and that they take that seriously. It's important to ask whether they have a lawyer on staff so that in fact they're getting legal advice, and it's nice for you to have that in a vendor. What litigation support software are they using? Here I would suggest to you that it's good for the vendor to have something that's not proprietary. It's something that they've developed that in fact they use that supports the litigation searching and productions that they're going to do. Do you want a testifying expert? Well, you know, it could be that the testifying expert in the vendor can testify about the chain of custody that was reached to be able to produce that document, and will have those kinds of forms and procedures in place, recognizing that anything that's produced is going to make sure that is going to have to be testified to as to how it was produced and that it was done so in a legitimate way. So it's good to have a testifying expert in the vendor. Will they make mirror images? Yes, of course you want them to be able to do that. Do they also do backup tapes? Yes, you should have a backup tape of whatever it is that's going to be the data that's going to be in the process. How about the metadata? You want to be able to make sure that the vendor is going to be sensitive to the capture of the metadata. The residual data, do they have ways of making sure that they can capture that so that you don't get caught there? And finally, or not finally, but in addition, you want to know and talk about what's the file format that this vendor uses. Do they do the PDFs that we talked about, or the TIFFs, or whether or not they do native file. Talk about with them what media that they can handle. Do they do the voice searching? Do they handle the kind of iPod and video kinds of searching? Can they do that kind of work for you? Do they have external hard drives that they're going to capture all of the data, including the different media? How about what do they use for filtering? And of course, in this case, many of the vendors are going to have commercial software that they use for the filtering and what's called the deduplication of the materials so that they can use commercial software and show that that commercial software is used and has gotten rid of the deduplicated, the duplications that are in the materials, and that everybody agrees that that's commercial software that does that and does that appropriately. How is the data going to be numbered and tagged? Yes, you want to make sure that they have ability to do that. What kind of searching? Do they do advanced keyword and natural language searches for you? And can they assist you in being able to search the data based upon your ability to give them what the parameters of that search are going to be? What's the time estimate that the vendor is going to take? You need a time estimate. You need to get some understanding of how long it's going to take them to do the various tasks. You'd like to have them demo for you their litigation support system so that you can see what they are able to do and find out what kind of searching that they've done and what kind of production that they're going to get from the documents that they search. You want a standard form contract that they use to be able to go ahead and negotiate off from in case you've got anything, but they should be far enough along that they have a standard form contract and make sure that that's signed between the parties. You want a start date when they can start, and obviously that's something that if you're in this discovery business, if you're thinking about a vendor, you want that start date to be soon. So those are some of the things that you want to interview the vendor for when you're trying to make a determination about whether or not they will be the right vendor for your e-discovery matter. Thank you.